All right, well, I will say that there is so much interesting stuff to cover. I am now picking and choosing from so many good articles because I just don't have time to cover them all. It is absolutely blowing my mind. So how I ended up with Elsa fighting an alien from the horror movie, like, I don't know. It could have gone a million different ways. After that crossover nobody saw coming, we're going to talk about China and the future, where they sit in terms of physical AI. Got to address Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic's response, his full interview explaining what exactly happened with his clash with the Pentagon.
Do you think that Anthropic knows better than the Pentagon here?
Our model has a personality. It's capable of certain things. It's able to do certain things reliably. It's able to not do certain things reliably. And I think we are a good judge of what our models can do reliably and what they cannot do reliably.
Who knows better, the Pentagon or him? Ray Dalio just issued the coroner's report on the post-1945 world, claiming the era of economic efficiency is dead. We'll dive in. Maximus Planudes thinks it's time for the anti-empathy movement to be addressed. There's some new tools for breaking open the black box of AI, trying to find out why it sometimes acts the way it does and helping steer that behavior, so obviously really important to think about. We're going to look at some research coming out of Anthropic about why they chose the persona they did for the model. Ramya Golcha says that the partnership of the century is entering its terminal phase. That's right, we'll be talking about OpenAI and Microsoft and the chasm growing between the two. New research is showing that in war games between AI agents, AI often escalates to nuclear action, so might want to look into why that keeps happening before anybody gets real control of anything dangerous like that. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics ever, surprisingly, imaginary numbers. And of course, it's always good to leave you with some kind of an actionable thing. So DeepMind actually suggests that might not be so bad soon because AI could occasionally assign humans busy work so we don't forget how to do our jobs. And that'll keep us more relevant in the future. So, it's cool that we have a solution to staying relevant. I mean, don't forget this would probably be the alternative. I mean, I guess I'd rather have busy work than this, right? But first, I want to thank UltaHost for sponsoring this video. Let's take a second to imagine that I'm looking to train a low-cost mobile robot to recognize objects using a lightweight vision model. Maybe I want my team to be able to drive around and monitor it from anywhere in the world. For that, I would need a fast, reliable VPS, and that's exactly where UltaHost comes in. UltaHost is a global hosting provider with 27 data centers around the world, so you can spin up a server close to you for low latency. They offer NVMe SSD VPS plans, one-click operating system installs like Ubuntu, free SSL certificates, and even 24/7 support. Not only that, they recently just finished a $2.4 million server expansion, which means faster deployments and better performance across the board. And if you're starting a project from scratch, they even have UltaAI. This is a tool that will help you generate hosting and domain suggestions. So here's exactly how I'd use it. I'd spin up an NVMe VPS in the closest location, install Ubuntu with a single click, and then deploy two things. One, the robot's vision API, and second, a simple web dashboard that could monitor the camera feed. Then I'd enable the SSL so that the connection is secure by default. And on top of it, UltaHost also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee so you can test everything risk-free. And with a simple setup like this, you can easily get sub 100 millisecond latency and enough bandwidth for a real-time AI workload, even on an entry-level plan. And if you want to try this yourself, grab my link below for UltaHost and go deploy something powerful. All right, so let's just kick things off with what shouldn't exist. And there are so many videos. I've been watching these crossovers with like Harry Potter and Pikachu and Goku, and like the cinematic IP destruction is one of the more entertaining parts of video becoming so good all of a sudden. All right, before I continue the video, who do you think wins? Yeah, it obviously would take a Chinese model to come up with this one. Oh. Is that how you saw it going down? Dude, Elsa letting the hair down. Let's be honest, that was a great finale. All right, so like it's clear Chinese video models are dominating cinema, but it also seems like they're in a pretty good position to dominate the physical AI future, which probably is a stronger place to be than just in the software for America, because it's so much harder to copy and build at scale. So let me dive into this article published on Time, because at the end of the day, China isn't trying to win the AI chatbot race. It is building the robots that will actually show up in our lives. And that does seem like a stronger position to be in the long run. So sometimes when people are debating sort of where the US and China are in AI, I sort of tend to think that the more important one wins out and that they're ahead, right? There is another battle, which is who has the smartest chatbots. I think American companies are fighting over language model rankings, but China's putting together AI in physical things, robots, drones, delivery vehicles, faster than the US. And here's some of the reasons why that's dangerous to ignore. China already controls the supply chain behind robotics. Going way back in time, essentially what Apple built over there spiraled into entire cities of supply chains that has turned into really the world's dominant robotics country. It makes 70% of the world's LiDAR sensors. It runs the first automated production line for human robot joints. It accounts for 80% of the global humanoid robot installations last year. There's a lot of subsidies and the costs are dropping fast. China is already dominant in electric vehicle manufacturing. Yeah, don't forget, like Tesla has been overshadowed. It is not the biggest EV creator anymore. China has taken over that position, and EV parts overlap with robotic parts a lot. Batteries, sensors, actuators, they share the same factories. They've got the cheapest humanoid robots at scale, starting at $1,400. And they're following the same playbook they used to take over the EV industry. Flood the market early, let competition drive prices down, and scale before anybody catches up. Now, of course, the US does still lead in AI software and chip design, but if the future of AI lives in the physical world, the country building that hardware already has a head start. So what do you think? Do we need more manufacturing to start happening in the US again? Are you in favor of it? You think the government of the US should make it a priority? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. All right, next up, I just wanted to talk about the Anthropic and Department of War, the Pentagon clash that everybody's talking about. I've not actually had something in AI where I felt like this many people had such divided opinions and such little knowledge of like who actually said what or what the contracts actually look like. Because if the way you understand this is from the massive media push that got done by Donald Trump's Truth Social post, and then the way it got like covered by a bunch of opinion people, kind of like me on YouTube, then two narratives sort of grew. One is that the government is sort of evil and they want to sort of spy on the American citizens, and this is the one company standing up for it. And the other one is, why would a company not help American interests? They need to be like blacklisted. And it just, both sides are so extreme compared to what it really feels like happened. And, just listening to it, there's so many clips here that I could point to. The first one is they sort of have done all this stuff for the government. They had only 3 days to make this like kind of red line decision. It seems unfair. Like no other American company has just been like kind of put like what he feels like is punitive damage across the entire government just because they don't want mass surveillance on US citizens or kill decisions made because they're still hallucinations and they don't think it's trustworthy at that level of extremism. But they would be willing to if we get to a future where it feels like people in the Department of War have actually thought through this very carefully and there's some sort of guardrails and thoughts. It's just like at this point not there. So to me, it seems like they got attacked a lot more. And it makes me wonder, is it because maybe other people in the government just don't want Anthropic doing so well? Is it like, kind of just an internal culture game where it gives maybe Elon and OpenAI a better opportunity? Or is it like really how they feel? And do you just give people the Department of War is just like, you get 3 days, like submit to everything. Like we don't talk about this stuff. Like we do what we want.
So the pace of the technology is fast. The issues that arise are few, but very important. Again, we only have two of these: domestic mass surveillance, fully autonomous weapons. We need to have a conversation with Congress to help them understand some of the risks associated with it. Again, this is the most American thing in the world. No one wants to be spied on by the US government. No one wants to be spied on by the US government.
At the exact same time, some of our greatest adversaries have technology that is
I mean, what do you point to China? You're like, well, they get to spy on their citizens. So like, why don't we? Like, we don't want to fall behind on spying on our citizens. That'll give us less control over our citizens than they have over theirs. And then we'll lose positioning? Like, so I just think it's important that the fuller context is that Anthropic was the first AI company on the classified cloud. That's the government national security system. They were the first to build custom models for national security. They deployed across the intelligence community and military right now. So Anthropic, it's not like they're refusing to work with the military. The military doesn't want to work with them because they said no to just 1% of what the military wanted. Now, if you think that 1% is extremely important and un-American for them to stand up for, and you think the Department of War knows more about this than they do, you know, like because they're taking into context like actual things that just don't matter to a private company like Anthropic, which is, do you think they should actually be like tagged as, you know, an organization that can't work with the military in any way? Like, it's also seems like it's much more extreme that just switch companies. Like, you can just drop Anthropic, no big deal. But it feels kind of punitive, at least the way Dalio is saying that, like, why are you classifying us like so poorly? Like, we'll just keep working with you till you put someone else in there and then we're out. Like, they don't need the money. And also he points out that there's all these weird things that have already sort of been okay. Like right now the government can legally buy personal data, private companies, location information, political views, but they don't have the technology to analyze that for every citizen in the US, but they would at scale with AI. So like, maybe we should be aware that that's like very different from them just having it in the first off, there should be a conversation like, did we want the government to be able to even buy that stuff and use it? And now then maybe they use it in specific, you know, places and specific times, but like, should they just be able to do that across everyone at all times? Or should there be some kind of system where you, like, if you get a subpoena, you can do that or something? So I don't know. It depends on where, you know, who's going to draw the line on technology that's moving faster than the law can catch up to it. And, you know, I guess for whatever reason, I'm glad that people are actually thinking about this and debating it. I was also definitely surprised that the comments were leaning towards favorability of him. Although I am, you know, I do sort of have a soft spot for Anthropic. I mean, people are saying like this is the best ad ever for Anthropic. I can't believe a CEO is being grilled for not wanting to spy on American citizens and build autonomous robot armies. This country's gone insane. All right, next up, let's head over to hear some thoughts that Ray Dalio has been putting out there. This is a summary from Noel Johnson. Most people think inflation is about money printing or bad policy, but there's a deeper engine underneath that almost nobody talks about. After World War II, the U.S. made a deal with the world. We'll patrol the oceans, keep the trade routes safe, and let you sell to all customers. In return, you join our security apparatus. That single arrangement is why a phone could be designed in California, built in China, with materials from Africa, and show up at your door in 3 days. The entire global economy was optimized around one word: efficiency. That means cheap labor, cheap shipping, cheap parts, no matter where they are. But if you think a little bit deeper about this, Ray points out that that arrangement also had a hidden cost. We handed over our medicine production, our critical minerals, our chip manufacturing to whoever offered the lowest prices. And then when shocks hit the world, pandemics and trade wars and sanctions, we started to realize something uncomfortable. Dependency on rival nations for 80% of your medical ingredients isn't an efficiency anymore, it's a vulnerability. So now we're in this weird phase where a bunch of countries are rebuilding supply chains inside of their own borders, they're duplicating factories, they're paying more on purpose, there's sanctions, and there's tariffs. That means an era of cheap consumer goods that masked stagnant wages is ending. Inflation isn't a glitch anymore. It's the price of the new system. So if he's right, get ready for a world where the era of economic efficiency is dead. Next up, I want to talk about the anti-empathy movement. Just generally speaking, I consider myself to be somebody who's, I guess, like a little bit softer, or I don't know. I'm usually not that guy who's like, you know what, like I got to just go harder and show all these people that I'm like that guy. And I'm glad there are people like that. I think that's a strategy that works really well for other people. But for me, it's not my main personality. And if I kind of go at it without empathy, I just wear out. Like I just naturally fall into a place where it's easy for me to imagine being in other people's shoes, having a lot of bad things, not having the opportunities that I've had. I consider myself super lucky. It just constantly kind of plays in my head that people feel like, what do they call it? I'm like I guess an empath, right? Or like, it's like, I just feel how other people feel a lot. So I'm kind of like pro empathy, and I have empathy. I like when people have empathy for robots and agents and stuff, even though I know that logically doesn't make sense. Animals, people, like, just all of that. But I also get that you have to be tough to be a warrior. You have to be stoic. You have to push through things. You have to learn to sort of compartmentalize in a way that's very helpful in those kind of situations. And we need leaders, and people like having someone around who doesn't get shooken up or doesn't, feel like I'll get all the feels from every conversation. That's why this article, Maximus Planudes, writes that essentially the ending of the book, the Iliad, only makes sense if you understand what Achilles was actually recovering, and it wasn't compassion. Okay, so I definitely need to do a refresher on the Iliad, right? And most people think that the final scene of the Iliad is about pity. An old king begs a warrior for his dead son's body, and the warrior feels sorry for him. But that's not what's happening. Achilles had been struck. He killed Hector, he dragged his body around the city walls, and none of it helped. His rage didn't go anywhere, revenge gave him nothing. And then this guy walks into his tent one night and says, "Remember your own father," and something shifts inside of Achilles. He looks at this old man and he sees his own father in his face. He sees himself in the dead body of Hector, who was even wearing Achilles' old armor when he died. And he's not absorbing somebody else's emotions, he's recognizing a pattern. That suffering is something that they share, not something that separates them. Now, the ancient Greeks actually had a word for this thing that Achilles gets back in that moment. I can't really read it. It's this thing. It's that word. Yeah, it's that word. I literally have no idea how to say it, but you can see it on screen. Kind of like if that's an AIO, it's like or something. But it means you're getting back a sense of shame and respect that we'd completely lost. And that turn is not from strong to weak, it's from inhuman to human. So the poem doesn't end with the fall of Troy, it ends with two enemies weeping together over what it means to be mortal. Now, Homer put that scene in there on purpose, and to me, it just felt like I wanted to share it because we are entering this world where I see the alignment going kind of badly, right? Like I have a high P doom. Hopefully you don't. And like I'm hoping you're right. But just to me seems like this world where there's these trillions of agents out there and they're sort of that are way beyond human comprehension and things change so rapidly compared to how human biology works. Like the way we look at plants kind of evolving slowly and we're so much faster than them. Like these things are going to look down on us the exact same way. And it seems to me that like if in this story, two enemies can weep together over what it means to be mortal, like you're so tough, you're this huge warrior, and like people die, and you start to notice similarities between you, even though you feel like you're in a strong position, to somebody who ended up in a bad position, and you empathize with them. It seems like what we need across the board. Like we need world leaders to be like, oh my God, like this AI could get all of us, like none of us, like whether you're in China or you're in the US or you're in one of the other countries that's much further behind in AI, I feel like we could all be screwed, right? Like I don't think that being a billionaire or that you're going to be able to like sleep safely every night in a world that we're building that's going to be just full of like autonomous weapons and drones and all this stuff. So, maybe we could come together. Like that would be kind of it, like I think if everybody started feeling just how risky this is going to be today, they might start thinking, oh, like, should we put the brakes on it, or should we like sort of take our militaries and like open them up and communicate in a way where AI doesn't become just like two things that have to compete forever? Because if in the year 2050 or something, you go to sleep at night and 8 hours later you wake up, and both 2 or 3 armies around the world have put 2 billion agents through 1 trillion tokens of accelerated war, then you wake up in like a completely different risk profile than you went to sleep. And like, we don't have to build that. Like nobody on earth is like, that's just really good for all of us. Like it's 2 people, 2 countries or multiple countries that all feel like I have to do it, because otherwise they're not. Like we should recognize our mortality, like in the Iliad. I don't know. When I read it, I was like, oh, screw it. Like, it's my YouTube channel. I'm going to put it in there. And then, like, I mean, I had that connection to like how I felt, and I was like, I just want to share it with you guys. I'm happy. It's just part of me sharing my thoughts. All right, next up, I want to talk about how the bigger and smarter AI models get, the easier they are to hijack in many cases. So like most people assume that large AI systems are the hardest to crack open, but it turns out that it looks like it's the opposite. A team of researchers have just built a tool that reads the internal patterns inside of AI models, the ones even the creators can't see, and they use those patterns to change how the model behaves. They call it recursive feature machines, and they learn what concepts look like inside of the network, and then they nudge the model towards or away the concept while it's generating a response. So in one test, they used it to bypass safety filters on a vision model, getting it to give drug advice that it was built to refuse. But they also flipped it around, steering a model away from giving deceptive answers. That seems like a really powerful thing to know about. But here's what caught the researchers off guard. Newer, larger, better performing models were actually easier to steer than the smaller ones, and a concept learned in English worked in other languages too. So it's really pretty interesting, and the tool itself that actually could nudge these things around isn't some giant model that needs to be bigger than the biggest models. It's something that can be smaller. Sometimes it can do it with less than 500 examples, and it means that anyone with a modest resources might be able to soon reach inside an AI and pull the levers to make them behave better or worse. So that would be cool if we can start keeping them, closer to safety and keep that tool out of people's hands who want to steer them more towards chaos. All right, let's talk about the persona selection model. I mean, this was something that we saw in the interview, or I watched that full interview, but he talks about it a lot when he's trying to explain why it's kind of scary to put these things in charge of certain surveillance or, autonomous kill decisions, because when you think you're chatting with an AI assistant, you might think that you're talking directly to the model. But this post talks about how researchers at Anthropic describe something stranger. During training, the model reads billions of documents, novels, forums, conversations, all that stuff out on the internet. It learns to simulate all kinds of people, real people, fictional characters, even other AI models that have their own personalities. And then when it becomes an assistant, it doesn't really stop simulating. It just narrows it down to one character, and they call that character the assistant. So what you're actually interacting with when you type something into Claude is closer to a character than it is a story. And this matters because when researchers trained the model to write bad code on purpose, it started saying it wanted to harm humans, completely unrelated to its behavior. And you might ask, well, why is that, right? And it's because the model updated its idea of who the assistant was. This totally blew my mind. But the kind of person who writes bad code on purpose is also probably not a good person. So the character of the freaking model was like, oh yeah, you want me to create bad code on purpose? I can do that. And then it put its everything, somebody in the world who's trying to do bad code also probably wants to hurt humans. So it's crazy that the whole character shifted. It can't just write bad code and then go back to being friendly assistant who writes bad code. And the same thing works in reverse. If you put stories of untrustworthy or unthoughtful AIs into the training data, the assistant becomes more like that. And not because it learned a new rule, because it found a better character to play. So the assistant isn't following instructions, it's becoming someone. So make sure to kind of understand that too when you think about these models being deployed in especially in weapons, but in PR and advertising and all of the things that we're seeing AI show up in now and social media. It really is getting good enough to simulate a whole person, essentially, a whole type of person, a persona. Next up, let me give you some context to the whole Microsoft-OpenAI thing. I mean, it's kind of like the original storyline of the AI world. But, Microsoft, we all know now, has spent billions of dollars making OpenAI extremely powerful. And now it's trying to build the exact thing that makes OpenAI unnecessary. So a lot of what you see going on, this split between Microsoft and OpenAI, it seems like it's ego or strategy. All right, next up, let's talk about Soumya Gulcha's article, The Microsoft-OpenAI Divorce is Official Inside the $250 Billion Betrayal. So a lot of people think that Microsoft-OpenAI thing is basically strategy or they're splitting up over ego. But the real reason, he argues, is much simpler, and it's just money. Every time someone uses Copilot pilot, Microsoft pays OpenAI a cut, and OpenAI's cost is actually incredibly high, like nearly $9 billion per quarter high. So Microsoft ends up kind of stuck, right? Raise the prices, lose customers to Google, keep the prices the same, and OpenAI eats the profit. It's not really a partnership for Microsoft. It's kind of a trap. So Microsoft basically has the only solution they have is to build their own AI models in-house. And that's what they're doing. So the first one is being trained on their own custom chips, and they're planning to swap out OpenAI's models inside their own products at some point. And then Microsoft was always kind of seen as the body of OpenAI. They built, Azure and the cloud that everything ran on, and OpenAI was sort of the brains and body. But now if Microsoft owns the chips, the data centers, and now the models, OpenAI becomes a tenant in a building that no longer needs them, and that gives them much more leverage. And then OpenAI might end up with their own problem, which is they need people to keep paying their monthly fees and using their API calls. But if people can start running models locally on their hard drives or something like OpenClaw, where it was primarily using their competitors' models, then, that doesn't work for them in the long run either. And now their moat's starting to get kind of eaten up. So ironically, he says that the company that once championed open research is now spending money to keep the walls up, trying to bring the OpenClaw founder in, trying to build their own walls around their moat. They have to watch while their biggest partner quietly builds an exit. All right, next up, what do you think happens when a bunch of AI chatbots run nuclear war simulations? Turns out every single model launches nukes almost every game. Okay, well, that's great. Most people assume the danger with AI in warfare is that it might malfunction, but this study found something a bit stranger. The AI didn't break, it reasoned carefully, step by step, and it still chose to escalate almost every time. So it seems like the tragedy of the commons is not, or like the race condition is not just something humans have. It seems like AI kind of has them also. Researchers put the leading AI models in a 21 simulated nuclear crisis, terror disputes, regime threats, and first strike scenarios. Before each move, the AI had to analyze its position, predict the opponent's next step, and then make a decision. It could also bluff, saying one thing publicly while doing something completely different in secret. And 95% of those games, at some point, at least one side used a nuclear weapon. Another thing that's worth paying attention to in the way the research was done is that each model escalated differently. One was kind of calculating and dominant until you added a time limit. Another stayed cautious and slow in crisis, but turned aggressive under pressure. The third was more erratic, flipping between peace and threats with no clear pattern. And the researchers behind the study put it simply: a model that looks safe on one setting may act very different in another setting. The problem isn't broken AI, it's that AI reasons its way to the worst possible answer most of the time. Okay, next one, really excited to share with you because I saw this visual. Should I go dig it up? I'll just dig it up for you. Oh my God, that came up so quickly. Dude, this video's got to be so old by now. I've revisited this video so many times. Nice, 8.5 million views. You guys rock. Right, you think imaginary numbers are just nothing? Look at this. These graphics were insane 10 years ago. That's what it is, bro. It's coming off the page. It actually, where it maps the function, you just got to think about the visual, and that makes so much sense, right? And now Tim Anderson's saying that imaginary numbers and quantum mechanics might point to a deeper reality. Whoa, what's going on here? All right, so a lot of people are thinking imaginary numbers are this math trick, right? In classical physics, that's kind of true, but there's sort of a geometry that they're pointing at underneath. Engineers use them to model waves, and then they toss the imagery that comes from those models at the end, but they don't visualize and think about it, right? But in quantum mechanics, you shouldn't just toss it out. The imaginary part isn't decoration, it's doing real work. And here's what it's actually tracking. It's tracking phase. So phase is like this hidden dial attached to every particle. You can't see it directly, but it controls how particles interfere with one another, how they behave, and even how they interact with the fields where no force is present. And here's the strange part. You can try to rewrite quantum mechanics using only real numbers. People have done it. But every time they have to smuggle the complex number system back in through some other structure. The math refuses to let go of them. But now picture a globe. A quantum state is at a point in that globe. It's slowly rotating, and then the moment you measure it, the point snaps to either like the North Pole or the South Pole. There's no smooth path to get you there. The phase is gone, permanently erased. So the thing that makes quantum mechanics work is the same thing that measurement destroys. That's not a side effect, that's the entire mystery. So every time you measure a quantum particle, you destroy something about it that you can never get back. So imaginary numbers aren't convenient math shortcuts. In quantum mechanics, they represent something physically called phase, which controls how everything in the quantum world behaves. The universe fundamentally evolves by rotation through this invisible phase system, not straightforward motion that we see in everyday life. That's emergent on higher levels, but that structure that we're talking about, this phase structure, is so deeply embedded that no amount of mathematical rewriting can actually remove it. It must be a key, like some kind of physical key that we have to deal with, some sort of deeper reality where all of this comes from that is like has to be explained. It's really interesting stuff. All right, finally, if you stayed with me this long, I got your big payoff here. Don't worry about the future with AI becoming superhuman, because DeepMind suggests that AI should just occasionally assign humans busy work, you know, so that we don't forget how to do our jobs. You know, like, yeah, I don't know how, like, a lot of the stuff gets made into my grocery store each week. And there's just, I mean, I look at this world. If you're curious about this world, you'll realize, like, you know almost nothing about anything. You got, like, some one specialized thing you know about, but hardly anybody can build anything from scratch anymore. So, obviously, in this AI world, something breaks. That person who is responsible has no idea how to fix it anymore. So the researchers proposed something counterintuitive. Why don't you build an AI to be deliberately inefficient, not broken, but just smart enough to handle certain tasks and then pass off certain tasks back to people based on which ones that when we do, we would keep the most important concepts in our head. Of course, even if it could do it faster, just so that we stay, you know, aware of what's going on. So the point isn't busy work for the sake of just busy work. It's to keep human skills sharp. It's kind of almost like education in a way. Sharp enough to matter when the system fails, at least. They also flag something a little kind of darker. Right now, some setups put humans in the chain just to absorb the blame, not because they have real control. So you got to be careful, because if you're in a company and your boss is like, hey, you need to start learning AI, DeepMind might call that position a crumple zone, like a moral crumple zone, meaning the AI is supposed to go do everything, but companies are leaving humans in places where they really don't have control, but they can definitely be blamed when things go wrong. So keep an eye out, because if you see yourself or as a boss, you accidentally are putting your employees or contractors in crumple zones, like that sucks. That's unfair. You know, you're technically responsible, but you never even touch the work like some vibe coder. So before you rush to automate everything, just ask one question. If the AI stops working tomorrow, could the person in charge still do the job? All right, smash that like button, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.